Have you ever been hurt by someone you trusted with your heart, only to watch them walk away as if your pain meant nothing? They thought they could betray you, disrespect you, and leave scars on your soul without ever facing the consequences. They believed your kindness was weakness, your silence was surrender, and your forgiveness was something they could take advantage of forever. But what they failed to understand is that when you hurt a genuine soul, the consequences do not always arrive immediately. Sometimes they come in the form of sleepless nights, haunting memories, and a guilt so heavy that it becomes impossible to escape. While they expected you to fall apart, you chose to heal. While they expected you to remain broken, you found the strength to rise stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. Now, every step you take toward peace reminds them of what they lost. Every success you achieve becomes a painful reminder of the value they failed to appreciate. The truth is, guilt is one of the most powerful forces in the world because it cannot be outrun, hidden, or silenced forever. In this message, we will uncover why hurting the wrong soul often becomes a burden that follows people long after the damage is done, how regret slowly takes hold when the truth can no longer be denied, and why your greatest victory is not making them suffer, but continuing to grow, heal, and thrive despite everything they put you through. Stay with me until the end, because what you are about to hear may completely change the way you view betrayal, healing, and the power of rising above those who underestimated your strength. The damage they caused cannot be ignored. There is a moment that comes in every story of betrayal when the truth can no longer be hidden. It may not happen immediately. In fact, for a while, the person who caused the pain may seem completely unaffected. They may continue with their life, laugh with friends, post happy pictures, and act as though nothing ever happened. To the outside world, it can appear as if they escaped all consequences, while you were left carrying the burden of the hurt they created. That is often the most painful part for someone who has been wronged. You begin to wonder if justice exists at all. You question whether the people who hurt others ever truly face the weight of their actions. But what many people fail to understand is that consequences do not always arrive in dramatic ways. Sometimes they arrive quietly. Sometimes they take shape inside a person's own mind, where no one else can see them. When someone hurts a genuine soul, they often convince themselves that what they did was justified. They create explanations that help them avoid feeling responsible. They tell themselves that they had no choice, that circumstances forced their hand, or that the other person somehow deserved the treatment they received. These stories become a shield protecting them from accountability. For a while, that shield seems strong. It allows them to move forward without confronting the pain they caused. Yet the truth has a strange way of breaking through even the strongest defenses. No matter how carefully someone hides from reality, there comes a point when the excuses begin to lose their power. The reason is simple. Deep down, most people know the difference between right and wrong. They know when they have crossed a line. They know when they have betrayed trust, manipulated someone, or caused unnecessary pain. They may ignore that knowledge for a season, but they cannot erase it completely. It remains buried beneath the surface, waiting for a moment of honesty to bring it back into the light. And when that moment arrives, it can be overwhelming. Often the realization begins with something small. A memory appears unexpectedly. A conversation comes back to mind. They remember the look in your eyes when you discovered the truth. They remember the loyalty you showed them before everything fell apart. They remember the opportunities they had to make a different choice, and the fact that they chose not to. Suddenly, the story they told themselves no longer feels convincing. The excuses start to sound hollow. The blame they placed elsewhere becomes harder to maintain. Little by little, they are forced to acknowledge what they did. What makes this realization so painful is that it cannot be changed. The past becomes permanent. Words that were spoken cannot be taken back. Trust that was broken cannot simply be restored with a quick apology. Relationships damaged by selfish decisions often leave scars that remain long after the event itself has passed. When people finally understand this, they begin to experience something they worked very hard to avoid. Regret. Regret is powerful because it forces a person to imagine what could have been. They start seeing the alternate future they destroyed through their actions. They wonder what life might look like if they had been more honest, more patient, more respectful, or more appreciative. They picture the relationship that could have flourished if they had protected it instead of damaging it. These thoughts become difficult to escape because every possibility reminds them of a mistake that can never be undone. Meanwhile, something remarkable is happening in your own life. While they are wrestling with memories, You are learning how to heal. While they are looking backward, you are slowly moving forward. The journey is not easy. There are days when the pain feels overwhelming, and nights when the questions seem endless. Yet every step you take toward healing becomes evidence that their actions did not define your future. You begin discovering strength you never knew you possessed. You start rebuilding your confidence, reconnecting with your purpose, and creating a life that is not controlled by the wounds of the past. That growth becomes impossible for them to ignore. They expected the damage they caused to leave you permanently broken. Instead, they see resilience. They expected your spirit to collapse under the weight of their actions. Instead, they witnessed determination. The very person they underestimated becomes a living reminder of the mistake they made. Every sign of your recovery challenges the narrative they once used to justify their behavior. The truth is that the damage they caused cannot be ignored forever. Time may delay accountability, but it rarely erases it. Eventually, reality demands to be faced. The pain they inflicted becomes part of their story, just as your healing becomes part of yours. The difference is that while you are transforming your suffering into strength, they are left confronting the consequences of choices they cannot undo. And that is why the deepest consequences are often not public humiliation or dramatic revenge. The deepest consequences come when a person is finally forced to look honestly at themselves and realize that they were responsible for hurting someone who never deserved it. That realization can follow them far longer than they ever expected, because some truths refuse to stay buried, and some damage can never be completely forgotten. Your strength became their greatest regret. One of the biggest mistakes people make when they hurt someone is assuming that the damage they cause will last forever. They believe that their betrayal, rejection, disrespect, or manipulation will leave a permanent mark on the other person's life. In their mind, they hold the power. They think they control the outcome. They imagine that once they walk away, the person they hurt will remain stuck in pain, constantly replaying what happened and struggling to move forward. What they fail to understand is that human beings are far stronger than they appear. The heart has an incredible ability to heal, the mind has the power to rebuild, and the soul can rise from situations that once seemed impossible to survive. The greatest shock for those who hurt others often comes when they realize that the person they tried to break has become stronger because of the experience. In the beginning, the pain feels overwhelming. When someone you trust disappoints you, the emotional impact can be devastating. It affects your confidence, your peace of mind, and sometimes even your belief in people. There are moments when you question yourself. You wonder what you did wrong. You replay conversations in your head and search for answers that may never come. The wounds feel fresh and the future seems uncertain. During this stage, the person who caused the hurt may believe they have won. They see your pain and assume it is permanent. They mistake temporary suffering for permanent weakness. But healing has a way of changing everything. Slowly, day by day, you begin to reclaim parts of yourself that were buried beneath the disappointment. You start realizing that your worth was never determined by someone else's treatment of you. You begin understanding that their actions reflected their character, not your value. The lessons that emerge from the pain become building blocks for a stronger version of yourself. You become more aware, more resilient, and more capable of protecting your peace. The experience that was meant to destroy your confidence starts teaching you how powerful you truly are. At first, this transformation may not be visible to anyone else. It happens quietly. It takes place in the decisions you make when no one is watching. It appears in the moments when you choose growth instead of bitterness. It shows itself when you resist the urge to seek revenge and instead focus on becoming better than you were before. These small victories may seem insignificant, but over time they create a remarkable change. The person who once felt shattered begins standing taller. The individual who once doubted themselves starts rediscovering their purpose. Little by little, healing turns into strength. This is where regret often begins to grow in the heart of the person who caused the pain. When they first walked away, they expected to see weakness. They expected to see someone permanently affected by their actions. Instead, they see progress. They notice that you are no longer defined by what happened. They observe that your life continues moving forward. The confidence they tried to shake has returned. The joy they thought they had stolen begins to reappear. The dreams they assumed would disappear are still alive. And suddenly they are forced to confront a reality they never anticipated. You did not stay broken. For many people, this realization is difficult to accept because it destroys the illusion of control they once had. They believed they had the power to determine your future. Seeing you recover proves that they never possessed that power at all. The strength they witness in you becomes a reminder of how badly they misjudged your character. They underestimated your resilience. They failed to recognize your ability to overcome adversity. What they viewed as weakness was actually kindness. What they interpreted as vulnerability was actually courage. As time passes, they may begin comparing the person they left behind with the version of you that exists now. They remember the loyalty you offered, the support you gave, and the genuine care you showed. They start realizing that qualities they once overlooked were actually rare and valuable. The more they reflect on what they lost, the harder it becomes to ignore their mistake. Regret grows because they understand that finding another person with the same depth of character is not as easy as they once believed. Meanwhile, your growth continues. You are no longer focused on proving anything to anyone. Your healing is not about making them jealous or forcing them to feel guilty. It is about reclaiming your own life. It is about refusing to allow someone else's actions to define your future. Every achievement, every moment of peace, and every step toward your goals becomes evidence that your story did not end with their betrayal. In fact, it may have been the beginning of a stronger chapter. The beautiful truth is that genuine strength is not measured by how loudly you respond to pain. It is measured by your ability to rise after being knocked down. It is measured by your willingness to keep moving forward when life gives you every reason to quit. Strength is choosing growth over resentment, wisdom over anger, and peace over revenge. When you do that, you accomplish something extraordinary. You transform a painful experience into a source of personal power. And that transformation becomes impossible for those who hurt you to ignore. They may not admit it publicly. They may never say the words out loud. But deep inside, many people recognize the truth. They realize they underestimated someone who was far stronger than they appeared. They recognize that the person they tried to diminish became stronger because of the very challenges they created. In the end, your strength becomes their greatest regret, not because you sought revenge, but because you proved that your spirit could not be broken. While they remain trapped by the memory of their choices, you continue moving toward a future built on resilience, wisdom, and self-respect. That is a victory no one can ever take away from you. Guilt grows louder in silence. One of the greatest misconceptions people have about guilt is that it arrives immediately after a wrong decision is made. In reality, that is not always how it works. Sometimes people hurt others and appear completely unaffected. They move on with their lives, distract themselves with work, relationships, entertainment, or endless activity. To the person who was hurt, this can feel incredibly unfair. You may wonder how someone could cause so much pain and then continue living as though nothing happened. It may seem like they escaped accountability while you were left carrying the emotional weight of their actions. But what many people fail to realize is that guilt often works quietly. It does not always appear in public. It does not always show itself through dramatic apologies or visible suffering. Instead, it waits. It lingers beneath the surface, growing stronger over time until it becomes impossible to ignore. In the beginning, people often protect themselves from guilt by creating excuses. They tell themselves stories that make their actions seem reasonable. They convince themselves that they had no choice, that circumstances forced them into certain decisions, or that someone else was responsible for the outcome. These explanations provide temporary comfort because they allow a person to avoid facing the truth. As long as they continue believing their own justifications, they can keep guilt at a distance. They can pretend that what happened was not entirely their fault. The problem is that excuses rarely survive forever. Deep inside, most people know when they have crossed a line. They know when they have betrayed trust, broken promises, manipulated someone, or treated another person unfairly. They may suppress that awareness for a while, but they cannot erase it completely. It remains hidden beneath layers of rationalization, waiting for a moment when honesty becomes unavoidable. And those moments often arrive when life becomes quiet. Silence has a unique power. During the busy hours of the day, people can distract themselves from uncomfortable thoughts. They can stay occupied with responsibilities, conversations, social media, or endless noise. But eventually, there comes a moment when the distractions fade. The room becomes quiet. The phone is put down. The conversations end. There is nothing left to focus on except their own thoughts. That is when guilt begins speaking the loudest. A person may suddenly remember a conversation they have not thought about in months. They may replay a moment when someone trusted them completely, only for that trust to be broken. They may remember the disappointment in someone's eyes, the pain in their voice, or the kindness they received before choosing to hurt that person. Memories that seemed buried start resurfacing without warning. The mind begins connecting dots that were once ignored. The reality of what happened becomes harder to escape. What makes guilt so powerful is that it forces people to confront not only what they did, but also who they were in that moment. It challenges the image they have of themselves. Most people want to believe they are good, fair, and decent human beings. When they are forced to recognize actions that contradict those beliefs, an internal conflict begins. They are no longer just remembering a mistake, they are questioning their own character. That conflict can be deeply uncomfortable because it requires honesty, and honesty is often far more painful than denial. The silence becomes even heavier when they begin realizing the consequences of their actions. Perhaps they see that the person they hurt genuinely cared about them. Maybe they recognize that the loyalty, support, and love they once took for granted were not things they could easily replace. As time passes, they may encounter people who do not offer the same sincerity or commitment. Suddenly, comparisons begin forming in their mind. They start understanding the value of what they lost. The realization arrives too late, but it arrives nonetheless. For some people, guilt appears in unexpected ways. It may surface during important milestones, when they wish they could share a moment, one with someone who is no longer in their life. It may emerge during difficult seasons, when they realize that the person they hurt would have stood by them when others walked away. It may show up when they witness kindness from someone else and are reminded of the kindness they failed to appreciate. These moments have a way of reopening old memories and forcing them back into the spotlight. Meanwhile, something important is happening in your life. While guilt is growing louder in their silence, you are learning how to find peace in yours. At first, your silence may have been filled with sadness, confusion, and unanswered questions. But over time, that silence becomes a place of healing. You begin understanding that not every wound requires an explanation to heal. Not every betrayal needs closure from the person who caused it. Sometimes, closure comes from accepting what happened, learning from it, and choosing to move forward anyway. That choice is powerful because it frees you from carrying the burden of someone else's actions. You stop waiting for an apology that may never come. You stop depending on another person's guilt to validate your pain. Instead, you focus on your own growth, your own healing, and your own future. The energy that was once spent dwelling on the past becomes fuel for creating a better life. And that is often where the deepest contrast appears. While you are building peace, they may be battling memories. While you are discovering freedom, they may be confronting regret. The silence that once seemed empty becomes filled with different experiences for each of you. For you, it becomes a place of recovery. For them, it becomes a place where the truth can no longer hide. The reality is that guilt has a voice, and that voice becomes stronger when there is nowhere left to run. It does not need an audience. It does not require public exposure. It simply requires honesty. When a person is finally alone with their thoughts and forced to face the consequences of their choices, the truth has a way of speaking louder than any excuse ever could. And sometimes, the heaviest burden a person carries is not what others think of them, but what they know about themselves. When the world goes quiet, they realize what they lost. One of the most painful lessons people learn in life is that value is often recognized only after it is gone. When someone has constant access to a loyal, caring, and genuine person, they sometimes begin to take that presence for granted. The kindness becomes expected instead of appreciated. The support becomes ordinary instead of special. The loyalty becomes something they assume will always be there no matter how they behave. Over time, they stop recognizing the true worth of what they have. They become so focused on what is missing, what they want, or what they believe they deserve that they completely overlook the treasure standing right in front of them. Then one day, through their own choices, they lose it. And that is when reality begins to teach a lesson that no one can avoid. At first, they may not fully understand the significance of what has happened. In fact, some people walk away believing they made the right decision. They convince themselves that they will easily find something better. They assume that the person they hurt was replaceable. They tell themselves that there are countless opportunities waiting ahead, and that losing one relationship, friendship, or connection is no big deal. For a while, this belief gives them confidence. It allows them to ignore the consequences of their actions and move forward without looking back. But life has a way of revealing the difference between what is common and what is truly rare. As time passes, they begin meeting different people. Some relationships are shallow. Some friendships are temporary. Some connections lack honesty, trust, or consistency. They start noticing qualities that are missing. They realize that genuine loyalty is not something that appears everywhere. Authentic support is not guaranteed. True kindness is not as common as they once believed. Slowly, comparisons begin forming in their minds, even when they do not intend for it to happen. They remember how you stood beside them during difficult moments. They remember the patience you showed when others would have walked away. They remember the encouragement you offered when they doubted themselves. They think about the times you gave your energy, your attention, and your care without expecting anything in return. Memories that once seemed ordinary suddenly appear far more valuable than they did before. What they once overlooked now stands out with remarkable clarity. The hardest part is realizing that some losses cannot simply be reversed. Many people assume they will always have another chance. They believe they can return whenever they want and pick up where they left off. But life does not always work that way. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. Some opportunities disappear forever. Some relationships reach a point where they can never return to what they once were. This realization often creates a deep sense of regret because people begin understanding that their actions carried consequences they never anticipated. The person they hurt is no longer standing in the same place waiting for them. While they were focused on their own choices, you were learning how to heal. While they were assuming you would always be available, you were rebuilding your life. While they believed they could return whenever it suited them, you were discovering your own strength and worth. This is often the moment that surprises them the most. They expected life to remain unchanged. Instead, they find that time has moved forward, and so have you. Your growth becomes impossible for them to ignore. They see a version of you that is stronger, wiser, and more confident than before. They notice that you are no longer seeking validation from people who failed to appreciate you. They recognize that your happiness is no longer dependent on their presence. The person they once underestimated has become someone who understands their own value. And with that realization comes an uncomfortable truth. They lost access to someone who genuinely cared. For many people, this awareness creates a type of regret that lingers for years. It is not simply about missing a person. It is about understanding what that person represented. Genuine relationships offer something that money, status, and temporary pleasures cannot replace. They provide trust, emotional safety, understanding, and support. When someone throws those things away through selfishness, pride, or poor decisions, they eventually discover that replacing them is far more difficult than they imagined. What makes the regret even deeper is the realization that the loss was avoidable. They did not lose you because of bad luck or circumstances beyond their control. They lost you because of choices they made. They had opportunities to be honest, respectful, and appreciative. They had chances to protect the relationship instead of damaging it. Looking back, they can often see the exact moments when different decisions could have changed everything. That awareness can be incredibly painful because it removes every excuse. It forces them to accept responsibility for the outcome. Meanwhile, your journey continues in a different direction. You begin understanding that your value never depended on whether someone recognized it. A diamond remains valuable even when someone fails to appreciate it. In the same way, your kindness, loyalty, and character were always valuable, even when they were taken for granted. The difference now is that you recognize that value yourself. That self-awareness changes everything. Instead of chasing people who fail to appreciate you, you become more selective about who receives your time, trust, and energy. You learn that not everyone deserves access to your heart. You understand that protecting your peace is not selfish, it is necessary. The lessons you gain through pain become part of your strength, and that is where the greatest contrast appears. While you are building a future rooted in self-respect and growth, they are looking back at what they lost. While you are discovering new opportunities, they are replaying old memories. While you are embracing the next chapter of your life, they are confronting the consequences of the chapter they chose to close. In the end, one of life's most powerful truths remains unchanged. People often recognize the value of a good soul only after they have lost access to it. By the time they fully understand what they had, the opportunity to keep it may already be gone. That realization becomes a lesson they carry with them, not because someone punished them, but because life itself revealed the cost of taking something precious for granted. And sometimes, the deepest regret comes from knowing that what was lost was never impossible to keep. It simply needed to be appreciated while it was still there. Your peace is their greatest lesson. There comes a point in every healing journey when you realize that true victory has nothing to do with revenge. In the beginning, after being hurt, betrayed, or deeply disappointed, it is natural to want justice. You want the people who caused your pain to understand what they did. You want them to feel the weight of their actions. You want them to recognize the damage they created, and perhaps even experience some of the same hurt they placed on your shoulders. These feelings are part of being human. When someone wounds your heart, the desire for fairness can feel overwhelming. But as time passes and healing begins to take root, something remarkable happens. You start to understand that your greatest power was never in making them suffer. Your greatest power is in finding peace despite what they did. At first, peace may seem impossible. The memories are still fresh. The emotions are still intense. Questions continue to circle through your mind. You replay conversations, revisit old moments, and search for explanations that may never come. Some days you feel strong, while other days the hurt feels as heavy as it did in the beginning. Healing is rarely a straight path. It comes with setbacks, frustrations, and moments of doubt. Yet with every step forward, you begin discovering something important. The person who hurt you no longer controls your future unless you allow them to. This realization changes everything. When you stop allowing someone else's actions to dictate your emotional state, you begin reclaiming your power. Instead of focusing on what was taken from you, you start focusing on what can still be built. Instead of dwelling on the betrayal, you invest your energy into growth. You learn new lessons, develop stronger boundaries, and gain a deeper understanding of your own worth. Slowly, your attention shifts away from the people who caused the pain and toward the person you are becoming. That shift is where real transformation begins. Many people believe strength is about fighting back. They think power comes from proving a point, winning an argument, or making someone regret their choices. But some of the strongest people in the world never seek revenge at all. They choose something far more difficult. They choose peace. They refuse to let bitterness take root in their hearts. They refuse to spend years carrying anger that only drains their energy. They make the courageous decision to move forward, even when the wounds are deep. What makes this so powerful is that peace cannot be faked. Anyone can pretend to be happy for a moment, but genuine peace comes from within. It comes from accepting what happened without allowing it to define your identity. It comes from understanding that another person's behavior is a reflection of their character, not your value. It comes from recognizing that your future remains full of possibilities, regardless of what happened in the past. As you continue growing, the people who hurt you often begin noticing the difference. They expected anger. They expected bitterness. They expected you to remain trapped in the pain they caused. Instead, they see someone who is moving forward. They see someone building a life, pursuing goals, and finding happiness again. They see someone who refused to stay broken. This can be a powerful lesson for them because it challenges everything they believed. If they expected their actions to define your future, your recovery proves them wrong. If they assumed your confidence would never return, your growth becomes evidence that they underestimated you. Every step you take toward peace becomes a reminder that your spirit was stronger than they imagined. In many cases, this realization creates more impact than any form of revenge ever could. Revenge may create a temporary reaction, but peace creates a lasting statement. It communicates that you have moved beyond the need for validation from those who failed to appreciate you. It shows that your happiness is no longer dependent on their approval, their apology, or their presence in your life. Perhaps the most beautiful part of this journey is that peace benefits you far more than anyone else. While resentment keeps people connected to painful experiences, peace creates freedom. It allows you to wake up without carrying the emotional weight of old wounds. It gives you the ability to focus on opportunities instead of regrets. It opens the door to healthier relationships, greater confidence, and a more fulfilling future. Meanwhile, the person who caused the pain is left to confront their own choices. Whether they admit it or not, they must live with the knowledge of how they treated someone who genuinely cared. They must face the memories, the missed opportunities, and the consequences of their decisions. That burden belongs to them, not to you. This is why peace is so powerful. It allows you to release responsibility for someone else's actions and focus on your own growth. You stop carrying a burden that was never yours to begin with. You stop measuring your progress by whether they feel guilty, apologize, or change. Instead, you measure success by your own healing, your own happiness, and your own ability to move forward. In the end, your peace becomes the greatest lesson they could ever receive. Not because you set out to teach them anything, but because your life becomes proof of a deeper truth. It proves that pain does not have to create bitterness. It proves that betrayal does not have to destroy a person's future. It proves that even after heartbreak, disappointment, and loss, a person can rise stronger than before. The greatest victory is not watching someone suffer for what they did. The greatest victory is reaching a place where their actions no longer have power over your heart. It is waking up each day with purpose, confidence, and hope. It is choosing growth over resentment, wisdom over anger, and peace over revenge. When you reach that place, you gain something far more valuable than justice. You gain freedom, and there is no greater success than becoming free from the pain that once tried to hold you back.